Miss Bobbi Johnson, you are back in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. We've done this a couple times before, and I've sat on the episodes because it just didn't feel like the right time to launch. I think it's the right time now. There's a lot of stuff going on that we'll talk about today, and the timing seems right. So first things first, introduce yourself, and then let's get off to it.
I'm Bobbi Johnson. I've been here for 30 years, and it's changed considerably.
Your breadth of experience is huge, and there's not really anyone around here, or very few people, we could definitely say that, who have seen what you've seen between the changes in the community and all the experiences you've had from just so much stuff. You've been in plane crashes, for goodness sakes.
Just one.
Okay, you've been in one plane crash, which is enough in my opinion. But you set up here early. So can you tell us your intro story, just how you came in and what it was like when you first got here?
My husband and I came in 1989 for vacation. We'd been living on a sailboat for 11 years and decided that we wanted to get off the boat and didn't want to move back to Cleveland, Ohio for some reason.
Good decision.
And
how'd you learn about it?
A bartender from Marathon was coming down, and she worked for Carico Real Estate and said, well, why don't you come on down? Because Eastern Airlines had a $99 round trip special from Miami. So we said, okay. So we came down, stayed at the Hotel Playa de Nosara with John. We were going to be here 2 weeks. I had the whole country mapped out, since it's only this big. And we never left. And she showed us what used to be Giardino Tropical. Was a house for sale. Now the Gardens, I guess.
Yep, the Gardens in El Locale for new folks.
She didn't have the key to the house, so we had to take the hinges out of the door to get in. It's a big piece of property. It's almost a hectare. It came with a pickup truck, and there were no vehicles back then. So that was like the clinchers. Bought the property when we got back to Marathon and moved here in October of 89.
Gotcha. So in 89, you set up what went from your house into Giardino and then presently into the Gardens and El Locale where that restaurant is. Hey, shout out to those guys for the benefit. Tell us real quick what happened the other night.
The other night, there's a gourmet chefs group of 6th graders from Del Mar Academy that sponsored a dinner to support Amor de Animales de Nosara. Primary is capture release of feral cats, spay neuter, but they help with the Nosara animal care, with dogs, getting them all adopted out, and all proceeds went to Amor. And there were over 60 people there. I didn't go. It's too late for me. It was the kids were very proud. The food was good, and I guess it was a really good turnout. Yeah.
George is the owner there, and he's a big fan of supporting the animals in the area. So shout out to him and El Locale. Let's move back into your stuff. So you set up here in 1989. What was the place like as far as just empty beaches and unparalleled?
I could walk naked down the beach.
It was that empty?
Right. If I saw somebody, I'd put my sarong back on. But that's before I found out I'm allergic to the sun. Good thinking here. But we're 10 full-time families living here.
Okay.
When we were at the house, we knew every vehicle that went by the sound of it.
How'd you guys communicate?
CB radio. Attention Nosara, transito se encuentro. But nobody had motorcycles at that time. So most people were on bicycles or walking.
Or horse.
And then we went to marine radios. And I don't think we got telephones until 97 or 98. And when those came in, I think that's when it opened the doors because communication was so much greater. Before that, you would go to the Gilded Iguana, one of the few public telephones, and wait in line, wait for your turn, get your stopwatch, go around the corner, time your call to wherever it is, and then pay up. Sometimes there was a long line. By the time you got to your turn, you forgot who you were going to call. So,
gotcha. So if it was that remote, what kept you here?
We used to see deer, tempest squides, jacarandes, all rabbits, all over the place.
Right in Guiones.
Where Nosara's escape is, that's where a lot of animals lived, because that was a big, huge piece of property. You know, I'd had jacarandis coming in my yard. My husband and I raised a margay that we stole from somebody trying to sell it for a year, and that was like the best year of my life, raising that beautiful little cat.
Wow.
Yeah. And somebody posted the margay that they saw at the Harmony the other day, said, must be Kasiki's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchild.
Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But you and Bill have told me so many stories over the years, from the deer that used to live inside of Super Nosara to, wasn't there a pet monkey named Felix there too or something?
Tony and Ziggy, who live where Jorge the horse guy lives, right by the Subi Baja, had a pet monkey. And then I think he finally let it go. I think it was a white face. And then it hung out with another white face. And when we used to do yoga at Estancia, it'd come over and steal like your frozen water bottle, you know, get some water. They were very bold. There's a house right next door to La Agua Viva that I used to manage, that the two that used to come in all the time, Tay and Cafe. One of my jobs was to go over and make sure they had cookies every other day. And then I realized, well, cookies probably aren't the best thing. But then they moved into Agua Viva. I'd see them walking across the beams and going into the kitchen and coming out with a banana. It was pretty cool.
So as we're sitting here right now, we're recording, it's mid-June 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We have a proposed temporary zoning plan that's being put in place, which is almost a little bit of a minor shock that it would happen, because so many of us had just been, we'll get a plan regulador when we get one.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's moving about the same pace of the road. And then now we have this in front of us right now. And it's not without controversy. It wasn't received extremely well in the manner that it happened. But where we're at right now is Nicoya is listening, and people are communicating at a level unlike ever before, no matter what opinion you have. And it's kind of exciting to see that happen. Number one, that we might have a plan. It looks like something's going to happen. And then number two, that people did actually get to give some feedback. So
I've heard they've already made some changes, you know, that so it's not quite affecting the Tico's lot size and that sort of thing, the social economic part of it. But originally, the original plan for this whole place was it was all supposed to be residential, not one commercial. That was going to be where Estancia is or was, by Five Corners, which is now how many corners?
Just now like 3.5 or kind of, it's different.
Right. But that's where the commercial area was going to be. And, you know, there wouldn't be all these bars. There wouldn't be.
That's interesting. So back in the day, I guess, the plan was for people, a lot of people might not know where Estancia is. So it's on the dump road, as we call it, that goes back towards Del Mar and the L section.
Thank you.
So that was where the commercial was supposed to begin there.
Yeah.
And it seems like the exact opposite happened. There's nothing there.
Well, I think there was a restriction also on lot size. And then, but INVU, which is the urbanization government, it's one little piece of paper never got signed during the whole process. It was supposed to be approved by INVU, any development, and it didn't get. And then when I was on the board of the NCA in 94, the president and I went to INVU to try and reinstate that. But we needed the signature of 100% of the property owners, which at that time we still didn't even know, and we know who the lefts are, you know.
You may as well ask for a rock off the moon by next week. Like, that's
Well, that happened, you know. We got a rock off the moon.
Oh, well, I'm saying if you need a new one by next week, though, that's the equivalent of trying to line up everyone in Nosara to cooperate, communicate, especially back then.
Right. I mean, and nobody knew who anybody. There were fewer property owners now. Now there are 806 water meters, you know, and a lot of those service more than one business or house. And, you know, the Nosara Civic Association, I don't think anybody knows who it is because everything's in a corporation. And there's no real way to contact that person, because if they apply for a water permit, it's the architect or the builder that's signing all the
right.
papers.
So basically, it comes back to the reason why we didn't have a plan in place was a technicality and a slip of the pen way back when, and you guys could never get that reinstated, essentially.
Correct.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that story. That's very interesting to hear. So let me ask you this. How did we come out as good as we did? And I know the answer, but I want someone listening to hear it from you. How did the community come out as good as it did, given that we haven't had something in place? Because if you look up and down the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, we're still completely different. Now, I'm not saying it hasn't changed. It obviously has, especially from your perspective. But people still show up every day. They're like, this place is amazing. It's beautiful. Look at these parklands. What the heck? How'd this happen?
The Nosara Civic Association was set up originally as a homeowners association, but it has no legal power whatsoever. And everything was voluntary. But I think it was basically peer pressure and appreciation for what is here. Back then we'd say, go out and take a look where the monkeys are walking. Don't cut that tree, try and work your building around that. And, when we first came, everybody bought as much land as they could to protect themselves and nature. I mean, the old retired people that paid $3,000 for, a 2,000 square meter lot, bought several just so they, and.
So it was the type of visitor, and you guys basically using social pressure to the new people who came in who were very receptive to the idea. So it sounds like there was a good bit of luck that kind of coincided.
Totally, because nothing could be enforced. Even the regulations that existed were not being enforced by the Muni, for the building. Sorry, Osway.
This is before his time. Okay.
Right. Right. He was pretty young when I came. I think it was luck, appreciation, and then all of a sudden a whole new generation came. Nobody had children back then.
Okay.
Or if they did, they were grown and gone.
Gotcha. It was not a family-oriented
not
at the
at
beginning
all.
type
not
of place.
Not at all. At the Iguana, we had a Mother's Day party in August, and there were 15 of us non-mothers,
I get you.
And somebody, no, you're not allowed.
So it was almost like a more rugged type of nature-oriented.
Pretty much.
Those were kind of the founders.
We entertained our, there were bridge clubs. We had beach parties all the time, because there were so few people, and, sand sculpting, kite flying, sort of group events that we all participated in, and potluck dinners, plays put on.
Sounds pretty fun.
It was fun.
So would you say the reason we don't have the condo towers and we don't look like Tamarindo, Capos, Dominical, Jaco, or any of these places, would you say the reason we are was just luck of the draw? The people who came in respected the environment and wanted to keep it that way?
Pretty much.
Wow. Now you're also known as an enforcer, and you have a lot of friends who respect you, and I think you're the godmother of Nosara, in my opinion. Like that label or not, that's.
If I find a horse in my bed, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But the point I'm getting at is you have a lot of people, a lot of enemies as well from the past. Now, for you to have this polarizing nature and people to love you or hate you this much, there must be a reason for that. In your words, what is it?
Well, I I oppose some legal actions that people have done. And so then, when they get busted, they're not really happy with me.
I got you.
And I think I still make enemies all the time. They're not old enemies. I think I'm making new ones.
You really?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. When I didn't get here full time until early 2009. And so you were here in 89, not family oriented at all. By 99, still probably not as much. Then the private schools start coming early 2000s, and then families start rolling in. And then by 2009, 2010, it's turned into a lot of families are around. And then you fast forward to today, it's a family oriented community. And a lot of your time and effort is putting into educating the children. So it's very interesting how it started off completely opposite, and look where we are today.
Yeah. Education of children has always been primary. All the wonderful organizations, the monkey, the animals, are doing educational programs, the recycle for the children, because that's where you have to start people learning and appreciate. I mean, when we first came, dogs were not taken care of at all. Skin and bones. You couldn't even buy dog food here. I had to make dog food.
I remember that recipe. I think maybe you emailed me one time. You guys used to have recipes for dog food, and you shared all this knowledge amongst the people who were here back in the day.
There's an old cookbook, the Gracious Jungle cookbook, that had that recipe in it. And I ended up having to we had to buy a freezer because, we had 4 dogs and 6 cats or whatever. And
so like in 89 to 99, was the stray animal population an issue at that point in time, or did that happen along the way? And then fast forward today, now we have Amor Animalis and Nosara Animal Care and whatnot. But back in the day, you didn't have any of these things. What was it like then?
I started bringing in vets from San Jose to do spay-neuter clinics at Giardino Tropical on the porch.
This is in the 90s.
You'd come to my house with your animal on a leash, and you'd wait in what was a guest house then, and would serve Bloody Marys. And then when it was your turn, you went up to the vet, and they didn't do the quantity that Safari is doing now. Well, there weren't that many animals, but,
right.
It was a start. And then I don't know when we started getting real dog food.
Probably about the time Super Nosara went from a ragtag type of place into an actual store. Hey, talk us through shopping here. What was it like when you first got here to 99, 09, up to now? What was the shopping experience? Because you and others have shared a lot of interesting tales with me.
Super Nosara was the only place, which was where Jerry's hardware store, Jerry and Carlon's hardware store used to be. Small building, the house that's still there. And I don't think I ate lettuce because it wasn't available for 10 years, at least 10 years. And you had to go.
Terry Lewis told me a story one time. I think he said the Paloma was...
That's where I was going to go. Yeah.
The Paloma was where the vegetable truck would come and everyone would be out there fighting over a rutabaga or something.
And Antonio Mendez started bringing... La Paloma was another little tiny... It was more like a pulperia and a restaurant. But Antonio started Mendez, who now runs La Paloma, started bringing in vegetables once a week. And it really was a fight. I was trying to get him to bring in fresh mushrooms. And I looked up mushrooms in the dictionary, and it was champignon. And he didn't know what, they don't have hongos in the Spanish-English dictionary. And... So I drew a picture, and he's like, "You want what?" I'm not a really good artist,
But that's what it was like back then. You literally waited on a vegetable truck to show up and get what you could.
Well, he finally took orders, I think. And then you had to, it was numbered because it really was like, Macy's department store, grabbing everything and stuff.
So when did the stores start getting going, like the Super Nosaras, the Palomas, and whatnot?
I don't really remember. I don't know.
I can say from my experience from 2009 to 2019, it's incredibly different.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have anything here. When we moved down here, we brought a 20-quart, set that big, huge cooler full of stuff, like spices, horseradish sauce, Worcestershire sauce, tampons. They didn't even have tampons.
So just basic stuff. You had to bring everything in. Mm-hmm. And then to get to Nicoya, how long did it take you to get to Nicoya? Or dare I say
about the same time as it does today.
We just have a couple more bridges in place now.
Sometime last year I went, and it took me longer last year than it did 30 years ago, with no bridges and no pavement. The pavement stopped right outside of Nicoya. That was it.
So I guess the road's a whole nother subject. I guess you don't feel too fondly towards it.
Oh, I think they have to pave it for health reasons. I was opposed to for many years.
When did you change your mind that pavement's good for the road? Because I get asked that almost on a daily basis, especially after we did the last road podcast. People are like, don't do that. You're going to ruin Nosara. And I was like, no, I think we're past that, guys. We need to pave it.
The health issues. I used to volunteer at Esperanza School, which is right there on the road. And I think Ralph Summers set up a guy to count the vehicles that went by, and within 3 hours, it was like 300 vehicles, and nobody slows down. And, the noise, distraction, the dust.
The sheer amount of dust hitting that school is crazy.
And now, people walking the roads, riding bicycles. I mean, even the cars, with the windows open, you're breathing all this stuff, and it's horrible. And
for me, it was around 2013, 14 when the first wave of new tourists came. Like, Nosara never really had big publicity all this time you've been here until I think it was late 2013 when the first major article hit, like the New York Times. And then it turned into National Geographic, and then it just started spinning from there. And then your average visitors came rolling in and the rental cars, and they're just hitting that school. And that's when it kind of hit me, as people are walking all over the place. There's more people coming into Guiones and Pilata for jobs and whatnot. And it went from, I want to keep Nosara small and enjoy what we have, to this is actually an ethical issue now at this point. The respiratory cases went through the roof, and they still are to this day.
Yeah, I mean, all the quad rentals and all of that. You see a trail of 13 quads with two people going to tear havoc up in the mountains, and they're having a good old time. And sometimes, there's a 5-year-old driving the thing.
That's a whole other subject.
Or the parents let their kids drive it around the hood, and kids are out there doing donuts in the middle of the road, and, they don't know how to drive.
They don't. The good news, at least in the past year or two, we're having a little bit less instances of, and this is a shout out to the providers of the quads and the golf carts. They truly have been talking with the tourists and say, hey, we know you're on vacation, but please don't let your kid drive. It's unsafe. Sometimes people drive way too fast still.
Right. I mean, some of the companies, like I'll say Limo Dan, is very responsive. If I see a 5-year-old driving, I'll let Limo Dan, your vehicle number 5 just went by with this young kid driving, headed towards the main road, So you're
a bit of an enforcer. So in years past, if someone was doing something that you felt was wrong, you're the person who called it in.
Yeah, I'm a Kobe Reyna, which is for Menai, and it's like a volunteer deputy.
Right.
Somebody called me yesterday. A lot was clear cut. Every single tree cut down.
That's unfortunate.
Next to a parkland. And so I don't know how that's going to affect the water flow through there. So after this, I have to go check on it. But, I would go to people that cutting trees down and ask for their permits, and sometimes some people were nice and other times not very.
I got you. So instances like this, is this where you got your reputation, where people are scared of you? And you were referred to yesterday, someone called you a powerful force. And I know you as Bobbi, who used to come to my daughter's Girl Scout meetings, and I've always been friends with you, but I've also seen the other side, and I've heard the stories, and you've told me dozens of them alone. So I'm trying to help someone listening to this get to know you a little bit, and your presence here and how much you care about the place. And maybe if someone hears something bad, maybe you were out there calling on someone, but you weren't doing it for the wrong reasons. You were doing it because you were trying to do something good. I mean,
people still called me, and I've told, this guy was in San Jose, notified me of what had happened because somebody else had called him. And it's like, well, you can call Menai as well as I. And, now you're asking me to go after the fact. So what's going to happen? We don't have witnesses. We don't, probably don't know who the owner is. And what kind of recourse can, make that better?
Well, it's like they were looking at you as the sheriff. You right. turned into the de facto sheriff.
Well, for Menai, I did a lot.
Okay, well, I'd say for the Civic Association and also just in general, because I've never seen you just do something because it was one group or another. I just see it's just part of who you are, is you care about the place. And you're not scared to speak up whenever you feel it's appropriate.
Right. I mean, the list I give a giant hand to the community of Nosara for how much it does give back to everything, to the recycle center, to the animals, the monkeys, the dogs, the cats, the food bank, the library, all of that.
On and on.
Right, security. Fortunately, you don't get enough, but, the bomberos. And it's so too bad, in my opinion, that there's so many people that have come in here with the attitude, oh, it's so beautiful, I'm going to build my mansion, on my $1 million lot, and they give nothing back. I'm treasurer of a lot of organizations, and I know who gives and who doesn't. And it just really upsets me that, people aren't giving back to the community which they supposedly love.
So